Hello everybody, I would like to welcome you all to our FASD Eyebites webinar. Today we're going to talk about our Eyebites cards, and I'm Dr. Anne Heath from NOFASD Australia, and there are so many of us across the country and across the world, as far as Canada even, that are joining us today, and it's just wonderful that technology has allowed us to develop a truly international collaboration for those that are living with FASD. We first met Rose at the 7th International Conference for FASD in Vancouver last year, and after seeing her presentation at that conference, NOFASD Australia invited Rose to do a webinar about the FASD Eyebite cards that she's created. And Rose told me that she thought up the idea of the simple cards after seeing how families and caregivers and social workers struggle to assist in complex and challenging situations. Rose works for Oranga Tamariki, the Ministry for Children, the Care and Protection and Youth Justice Agency in New Zealand. She's the Regional Disability Advisor for Auckland and the Tai Tokoro region, the top part of the country. And Rose's relevant background is that she's previously worked in rehabilitation with people with brain injury, and she's also been a foster parent. Rose has heard many FASD stories since she joined Care and Protection and Youth Justice, and in addition to this linking in with others, Rose has started to understand that much of her disability related work is in relation to brain damage from FASD. That knowledge, together with those collaborative relationships, have inspired Rose to develop a range of FASD resources, including the FASD Eyebites cards that have united us all here today. So we'll now get on with the webinar, and while Rose is telling us about the cards, please feel free to write any of your questions in the box on the bottom left-hand corner, and at the end of the presentation, any of those that haven't been addressed, we'll get to as many as we can. So I'd like to welcome Rose Hawkins. Thank you, Rose, for being part of this. Go for your life.
Thank you so much, Anne, and kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand to the Australians and also the New Zealanders and the Canadians who are here. Yeah, thanks, Anne, and thanks to NOFASD Australia. I'm really honoured to be asked to talk to you today and to talk to such a diverse group of people across our countries. Just there's some terminology stuff, and Anne's in Tasmania and I'm in Auckland as well too. So we have some slight delays as well in time and vision, so please just stick with it. And if my broadband doesn't work so well, I'll probably, my face will disappear, but I'll keep talking. Also, we tend to say, in New Zealand, we tend to say FASD, and so I'll probably try to intermingle FASD and FASD, but it's basically all the same, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So, okay, it's not about us, and it is about all of you who are watching today and meeting your needs. And I'm aware that there are people online who are family members, parents, carers of people with FASD, social workers, government workers, teachers, police. There's quite a range of people who've registered for today. So just, you know, it's about sharing this practice tool of the FASD Eyebite cards. Now this is the tool. Some of you might have seen them before. Some of you will have them, especially the New Zealanders. And so that's kind of what they look like, a pack of cards. And they provide some basic principles that others have found helpful to assist with helping someone with FASD. So let's face it, FASD, it's hard looking after children and adults who, through nothing they've done, have the difficulties that come with this condition. Once I realised that FASD was a major issue in my areas of work, care and protection and youth justice, I was looking at ways to help people working and living around FASD cut through easily into learning and being supported around FASD. So when things get tough, it's too overwhelming to look up a book. A pack of cards is a familiar, tactile, is a simple way of accessing and processing important messages. So the FASD Eyebite cards themselves, they haven't been researched, but the cards, they use approaches that are widely used in the FASD literature, and they've been used enthusiastically by many parents, caregivers, social workers, psychologists, paediatricians, people with FASD, and others in Aotearoa, New Zealand for probably the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years. So, moving the slides along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about FASD because I realise some people will know quite a lot about it. Some people won't know anything about it perhaps, or very little about it. So I just want to do some real basics, and that'll be the start. The second part, there'll be a 9-minute video which shows you the cards, and then the third part I'll actually be going over the cards, and at the end of that I'll be asking you for your feedback about some of the cards, any thinking that you have about some of the cards as you see them coming up. So yeah, here we go. So this is what FASD is. It's a diagnostic term. It describes a range of effects. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, the mother drank during pregnancy, and the effects can include physical effects, mental, behavioural and or learning disabilities with lifelong implications. So it's severe, pervasive, it's lifelong, and it's most often invisible. Here's a list, there's a big long list of neurological characteristics, and I guess the point here is that this is a brain-based disorder. So we're not going to be talking about the physical sides of it at all. We're really talking about the behaviour that comes from the neurological characteristics which maybe aren't accommodated for if we don't understand what they are. So here's the list. Go through quickly. Attention deficits, memory deficits, hyperactivity, the difficulty with abstract concepts. Time and money are particular abstract concepts. And there are lots of abstract concepts that we actually use. Yeah, time and money are two really key ones that you'll find people will have problems with. The poor problem-solving skills, there's confabulation, difficulty learning from consequences, immature social behaviour, inappropriately friendly to strangers, lack of control over emotions, poor impulse control, poor judgment. Now I'm just going to go over a couple of those. So confabulation, this is like, it kind of comes across like lying, but it's a neurological way of lying. So it can be about trying to make sense of things around the person without being able to put things in order. So they can join a lot of facts together in the wrong sequence. They're trying to maintain a good faith, but they're getting the facts wrong. So that's confabulation. Difficulty learning from consequences. Now, there are consequences to everything in life. So if you have a difficulty learning from consequences, it's a severe impairment in your life. And if people don't understand it, you can get into all sorts of bad situations. So a child, an adult with FASD, doesn't easily learn from consequences. So most children know about following rules by the time they start school. There's a way we feel the rules or consequences of actions. A child with FASD will not have the same feeling about the consequences, although they may be able to talk about the consequences if they have had conversations about them. So let's give an example. A parent talking to an 8-year-old child with FASD. So the parent says, don't cross the road without stopping and looking, or a car might run over you. It's difficult to learn for a child with a brain-based FASD condition, and there are reasons for this. So here are just a couple of reasons. The child has run across the road before and they weren't run over, so it doesn't happen every time. The child thinks in a very concrete way. Remember, they don't think abstractly. So it's difficult to understand that it might happen in one circumstance, but not in another. So another reason will be it's difficult for the child to understand and remember the lesson on a different road. That's the road that Mum was talking about, so it doesn't apply somewhere else. Okay, now there's this other one here, the lack of control over emotions, and I've highlighted that one. So typically people with FASD will have a limbic system that triggers really easily. So this is the really old part of the brain, so that the fight, flight or freeze response in the brain can happen at the least provocation. They lack the ability to interpret the size of the threat, so that something very small is reacted to as something very big. Someone brushing past them might seem like a very aggressive act when it was just a brush past. So one of the biggest challenges for people working with or living with someone with FASD is to keep their own emotional response in check, to help the person with FASD recover from the tension and stress of their regular overreaction. So you don't want to add fuel to the fire. And the cards, they're a self-care aid to help remind people how to react appropriately. So, okay, so just saying it as it is, some people who don't know a lot about FASD, isn't it just all of those things on the list? Isn't it just a politically correct way to make excuses for bad behaviour? Absolutely not. This is brain-based. It's like someone who's had a traumatic brain injury from a car crash, a severe stroke, or acquires dementia. Although these things are all different from each other, there are, some similarities in the fact that they're all brain-based and neurological. So many of you will probably relate to someone who's usually an older person, but sometimes a younger person who has an obvious known brain-based disability, because often the person may look different, or at least the impairment is understandable because the person is older, or there's perhaps been a car accident. Now the difference is that people with FASD are born with it, but it's not recognised, or it's invisible. And this is such a conundrum here. So here we've got a quote from Tversky and Knight, and the individual tends to appear to be normal, have average or above average intelligence, has strong skills with verbal expression and can say that he or she knows what he needs, yet cannot follow through. So the individual is often misjudged and criticised as if they're being overtly non-compliant, uncooperative, resistant, manipulative and unmotivated. So here's some examples. So a boy has a diagnosis of FASD, but you can't see it. He talks well, he's friendly much of the time. School and family try to accommodate him, but the boy starts stealing, perhaps inconsequential objects from neighbours and other school students. He has them in his possession, but he won't admit to it. The people around him see him as non-compliant, uncooperative, resistant, manipulative. What's actually happening? So there's ownership in FASD. You need to build an understanding of what this means. The boy's a concrete thinker. If the object is in front of the person, it belongs with that person. If the object's unattended, there's no sense of ownership, no felt sense of ownership. Think of a much younger child and how they perceive ownership and how we reinforce it. So the difference for the child with FASD is that they won't learn at all quickly from reinforcing because they have a long-term brain-based issue. This isn't something that you can teach and expect learning as you would with a brain that functions relatively normally. So the child is able to respond, though, if you say, if you have a negative inquiry, why did you take that? Tell me about what happened, because they have lots of practice with people having negative inquiries of them. So that boy in that situation, he can feel that the people are angry with him and he'll respond to the emotion in the situation, but he probably won't understand what all the fuss is about. And others will interpret his caginess as showing guilt. In fact, he might be feeling guilty having been blamed for something. It's just he can't understand exactly what it is he's done wrong. So, think of how a very young child responds to something that they just don't understand. So this is where we need the FASD practice principles, which just help reinforce things, and this is, again, what the cards are trying to do. So the child needs a lot of help. with help, the child or the young person is unable to organise themselves throughout the day. Without help, they're at risk of getting things wrong minute by minute. And without being understood, they're at risk of being seen to be intentionally doing the wrong thing. So with consistent FASD-informed support, and that's no easy thing, but with that support and with the aid for that support, the child or young person can live successfully day to day and ongoing, getting on with what they're good at. That's what we're aiming at. Yeah, it's hard. And this is probably speaking particularly to professionals or extended family here. So, in my work in particular, I'm often called by social workers when things are particularly tough, and that's when people have open ears for assistance but maybe can't process a lot. And that's when your input is most important to the recipient. You need to be able to cut through at that time. Carers get all kinds of advice from all kinds of parties and somehow need to distill the advice into practical use at the moment that they most need it. So the cards pull out some of the pertinent points that are needed when the chips are down. Yeah, and professionals also, you need to distill strategies for yourself. So this is, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is change the environment, not the person. And this is a nice little 2011 article, and I'll read through it. Behavioural interventions for individuals with FASD often reflect a reframing of challenging behaviour by shifting our interpretation of the observed behaviours. They also involve approaches to increase the capacity of caregiver or support systems to create environments that both reduce maladaptive coping on the part of the children and build strength. So it is about changing the way we see things so we can best help the person, and changing that environment so that we can best help that person. Okay, that's the basic background on FASD and what it is. And so now you're going to have a look at this video. It's about 9 minutes long, and it's self-explanatory. It does introduce the cards, and we've got Tessa Nottingham as the social worker speaking here. Yeah, self-explanatory. Here you go. Sit back, listen. Wondering whether that's actually playing.
I guess one of the examples is I'm working with a young boy, who's just turned 15. He's been diagnosed with fetal alcohol. Started throwing books around the bookstore, so because it was a big public area, what I did was I actually walked away from him and I told him I was going to be sitting down, and I pointed to where I was. And so I wasn't going to look straight at him where he was in the bookstore, but he came over to me and wanted to talk to me.
We're having a few technical difficulties here.
Are you angry at me? Do you hate me? And so I said to him, no, I'm actually really worried about you, worried about this behaviour, what's happening. Because he was trying to, I guess, roll me up He was
Thank you.
being quite verbally abusive, and for me, I know that's not him. I think it's just in the situation that he's in. So I just ignored that type of comments and that behaviour, and we just sat down there in a while for silence for would have been about half an hour. We just sat in silence, and then I just started speaking to him about various different things, and then we came back. With children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, it's a brain disorder or brain damage, and I guess you've got to look at it that although they may look like a 15-year-old boy and maybe able to hold a conversation with you and be quite engaging, they're still limited in their level of understanding of things. I guess things that I do with this boy, there's been times when he's called me up, really heightened anxiety and saying that he's got a knife, he wants to stab himself, he wants to harm himself, he wants to damage property, he wants to run away from home. So for me, I don't even ask him about those things. I don't even mention them. There was one incident where I just spent the whole time, I know he liked Shorten Street, and fortunately I watched Shorten Street, so that was quite handy, so I could talk to him about it. And I spoke to him about what was happening on Shorten Street at the moment, and to start with, he wanted to carry on with what he was talking about, but then he got distracted by talking about Shorten Street, which he enjoys, and it was actually 6:30 at night when he was talking to me, and I said to him, I'm not going to be home to watch Shorten Street, can you watch it for me and tell me what happens, and I'll call you tomorrow and you have to give me what's happening because it's really juicy at the moment. And so he was like, oh yeah, okay, and just went home. For me, I formed a really positive relationship with this boy, and I guess forming this relationship, he knows my sense of humour and I know his sense of humour. I said to them to not focus on the behaviours, especially if he talks about things that he's going to do, he wants to do. With him, the next day he's probably a completely different boy, and he may not even remember what he's talked about or what he wanted to do or anything like that. And I guess when he's in the heat of the moment of that, not taking everything that he says.
What would happen if you did continue talking to him about what he wanted to do when he's like that?
It escalates him a lot more.
Would he want to talk about what he wanted to do?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Becomes very agitated, very anxious, and at that time he often can't be reasoned with. I guess with distraction, we're not ignoring what he's saying, it's just diverting diverting him into a positive way. With him, people say, oh, he shows no remorse, he shows no empathy, but I actually don't think he understands what's going on when he's in that behaviour. So he actually doesn't know what he's doing, and it's like the next day, he has no recollection of what happened or the emotions that were happening at the time, the feelings with that, and that's, I guess, around to do with his brain damage, I guess, that he it doesn't comprehend what's happening. And it's not to say that he shows no remorse and all that, it's just he doesn't understand what's going on. And I guess that's a better way to understand it, because if you go with back the day after and say, now you're punished because of what happened or you've got consequences, it won't even register what on him that there was something wrong or that something was happening for him. So just focus on getting him out of that environment, because it's not a safe environment for him and for the other children and staff. If you take it straight home, that's his calm environment, because at his home, the way the caregivers have it is structure and routine. And I guess that's an important thing to know with working with children with fetal alcohol, is that structure and routine is really important for them. Knowing day in, day out what's happening, a change in environment can be quite disruptive for them. And I guess that's why you need to plan a lot of things when changes happen for them, because they don't understand. The other thing that we like to do with him is when he returns to school, we created this book that would go home and talk about the good things that are happening at school that he's done, and that would go back to the caregivers, and then he would call me up every day to tell me what's happening, and so I would reinforce how proud I am of the day he's had and what a great day he's having, and I guess just keep reinforcing that type of positive. The positive successes in his life. I keep it my same tone, and it works. I just don't leave any way for leeway. I've tried it in the past when I first started working with this boy, giving him options, and I guess I felt sorry for what he was going through, and I guess I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to be firm with him or anything like that, and I wanted to give him options. They just don't work, and what I found is just being quite set and in a nice way. And for me, whenever these incidents happen, the next day's a new day, and I guess I never change around how I talk to him or how I treat him. It's always consistent, and I think consistency is huge for this boy. Staying consistent in what I say, how I
Okay, looks like we're back to the slides again. I'm wondering how...
Rose.
Yeah?
Thanks for sharing it with us. That's a great video. It really is. Thank you.
Oh, good. Excellent. Glad you were able to see. Yeah, it wasn't appearing in front of me, but look, I'm wondering how all you watchers and listeners are doing out there. Hope you're going just fine. So we'll just move on to the next slide.
I think we had a couple of notes come through that people struggled with there with that video, seeing it, so we might be able to provide them with a link to that later on as a follow-up, so people can watch it in their own time. Yeah,
oh, that's a shame, because it is a great video, and it will be good if you do have an opportunity to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the first, what I call the first fundamental card. So, it's all about relationship, and there's nothing that underpins the care of a child, young person or adult with FASD more than the relationship that we form with them. So it's through this relationship that we can learn what's important to them, and therefore develop trust and an awareness of what will help them in different situations. So if, as you're listening to this, thinking of a particular person with FASD, and you're aware that there's no one who has that great relationship with a person with FASD, then this is something to get started on. So finding someone, you or someone else, to develop this relationship. It's fundamental to everything that that person is going to achieve. So that's just a good reminder about that. This is, jumped ahead. This is what I call the second fundamental card. These were given to us by a youth court judge in Auckland, Judge Fitzgerald, Judge Tony Fitzgerald. So this is the 5S, what we call the 5S model. Structure, this is the basis of what helps a person as long as it's imbued in relationship. So providing the right structure, support, supervision, the right type of supervision, like a much younger child, keeping it simple and building on the person's strengths. And so what we've done is we've got this template here. It's got two sides to it. You can't see all the information, but it is on our website. You can actually download it from there. And it's a way of using that particular card to sit down and work out how are you going to put together a structure in your home, how are you going to do the support, the supervision that makes sense to the person. So it's all got to make sense to the person, and it's got to make sense to the family and the caregiver, the way that's done, because it is different, it is counterintuitive. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down to, actually, no, I'll stick here. Okay, changing paradigms. So these cards, I picked these out for this slide because they are a little bit counterintuitive, and you know, you can sometimes ask questions like support not consequences, you know, isn't this just spoiling them? And you know, how are they going to learn if they don't have consequences? So assuming that a person with FASD will learn from one or several consequences when they neurologically don't have that natural link is like expecting a visually impaired person to read the small print and sign on the dotted line when they can't see the print, or to walk across the road unaided. It's patently unfair. So however, if you give the blind person the right support, for example, access to Braille and a guide dog, then they can function. Likewise, if you back off trying to apply consequences to a person with FASD and instead provide support alongside them to help them get it right, and there's a card for that, then they're more likely to have a repeated success than repeated failure, and more likely to get into a routine structure, and there's a card for that, to get it right in future with less support. So that's called error-free learning, setting up error-free learning. Okay, that can't, not, won't. You'll see a little slide in there, can't, not, won't. So it's a recipe for failure of all concerned when we get stuck with thinking that they just won't put the dishes away. They just won't do it. They did it yesterday. Why are they doing it wrong today? They're just being oppositional. So there are many reasons why someone might be able to do something yesterday but not today. One reason might be the neurological condition of the brain that typically works like a Swiss cheese with holes in it. So another might be that you're asking them to do it with different music that jars on them, or they might have other sensory issues that are triggered by the conditions on one day and not the other. Another reason might be an emotional regulation reason. They're more heightened about something else today than they were yesterday when you asked them. Another reason might be that yesterday you provided more assistance and today you did not show as much attention. So do alongside rather than independence. And this leads to the next slide, give attention, not they're seeking attention. So remember they're neurologically like a much younger child in many cases and in many ways. So they do need your attention to help them get over their emotions, calm them down, and to get through the task at hand, no matter how simple that task is. So think about this when you're planning to have a good start to your day. Okay, another card in there is given because they can't. So this card is about realizing that when someone with FASD is escalated emotionally to a point where they're not able to engage, they may have reached the stage of damaging property or hitting out. It'll only add fuel to the fire if you're trying to reason with them or to persuade them to change their behavior or to tell them off. So you may just have to give in for that moment. This is where safety plans can come into play, moving out of the way from the area. This is where relationship and knowing the person with FASD really well comes into play so that you can provide a personalised response to assist them to calm down. So what is it about the environment that helps them to calm down, and how long does it usually take them to calm down? No wriggle room. Next one, it's, you know, isn't this the opposite of the one above that says given because they can't, and isn't it too hard line saying no wriggle room? So here's something from Kristen Berry. She's a writer and blogger. She co-author of the book The Adoptive Parent Toolbook. So she wrote this: no wriggle room. Our son will bring up at least 10 non-related issues whenever he's dealing with something difficult. It's our job as parents to stay the course. Redirect the conversation whenever it is no longer productive. So you've got to be definite in your own mind about what's going to happen next. Set up the expectations. Don't be tempted to reason with the arguments being meted out. And the person needs one thing in their mind without having to be confused with lots of discussion, options, and reasons. That's all they can manage. So, okay, so then we go down to decide for based on relationship and knowing the person, and that kind of feels quite paternalistic. But it's what this is about is being realistic about what the person is able to do and consent to having done from a neurological point of view. So if you want a blind person to read a consent form and sign it and even teach them to see the form, it just doesn't make sense. So each person with FASD will be different in what they can and can't do, although there are often similarities as well. The person may be able to make a decision in a calm environment. For example, in, say, the formal task planning environment, some people will know about that, where there's lots of time to go over the same things in different and concrete ways, with lots of support of people who know the person well. So however, the tendency is to seek a decision from a person even when they haven't got that level of understanding, knowledge, or support. So you're likely to get an answer. That might change in the next 5 minutes. And the person's understanding of the implications of the decision is unlikely to be there. Now, this particular card is relevant for situations where there's a pressing need for a decision. Of course, the basis of a great relationship is important in knowing the person and having a sense of what they would like and need. You're able to pull together all the threads, whereas they might not be able to do this for themselves. So this is different to letting a usual teenager make a bad decision. The consequences for someone with FASD making a bad decision are too often going to be severe failure at home, failure at school, being kicked out of school, moving into the justice system. So the stakes are really too high for a person who can only respond like a child perhaps half their age. So there are lots of ways that you can use the cards, and here are just a few ideas for them. So you can use them just on your own to reflect on what happened when you're feeling heightened, or at the end of the day when you're wanting to do some planning. For carers and professionals, the cards, they're a single card, and so it's a simple reference point for discussion. You can kind of get an agreement more easily on what needs to happen by having those simple messages rather than having to sort of go through in great detail. So they can be really useful when you're having those sorts of discussions. In a caregivers group to use as a focus or reference for discussion, and just talk about each card, how that card was used, how that helped, how it was helpful, what you might do differently, what worked really well, and at a professionals or a families meeting to easily share information or approaches for reflection and planning to help at the time of explaining a diagnosis of FASD and for subsequent help. You know, it's about just some clear, simple messages. And for a person with FASD to reflect on how to explain to a friend or family member what works for them or not. So, you know, a couple of people have told me about this. You know, actually, the person with FASD using these cards themselves. Obviously, they would need to, you know, understand them well and have support. Also, just commenting on the cross-cultural use of FASD Eyebite cards. So, you know, we haven't tested these. I'm really interested in any feedback that people want to give about the cards, and, you know, possibly time for a bit of research. These cards are an adjunct to other support. They're not the answer. They are just part of a whole lot of support, but just a nice, easy, tangible part that you can just sit down and pick up and look at very easily. They can be used flexibly in different situations as appropriate. I think they've got basic human messages, so about enhancing connection, managing that primal need, calming of fight, flight and freeze, and about kind of getting on with life. So those are pretty basic. We've had some good feedback in Aotearoa New Zealand so far, and some cultural approaches may already incorporate FASD approach, and, you know, a tikanga-based Māori approach may perhaps already incorporate those basic FASD support principles, because that's kind of how things are run out anyway. And then the cards become redundant in that sort of situation. As a single messages on paper may seem to pull apart the wholeness of the cultural approach, but the cards can be used as perhaps as a quick ready reckoner to see whether a particular approach does in fact fit with FASD principles. Particularly if things aren't working, we can just kind of flick through them and see, well, maybe we're not doing this, and maybe we can introduce that in a different way. But my sense is that if you've got a healthy, holistic cultural approach, and that needs to take priority in how things are run out with, and this isn't about pulling apart things unnecessarily. Okay, so now we're going to say what card strikes a chord with you today. So this is the part we want a bit of feedback, and so I'm going to show you the cards here. Now I'm just trying to see whether I can flick back and forward between slides so that I can show you. I can actually pop an individual slide up if necessary. I don't seem to have the device here. So anyway, if you can perhaps look at the cards here. And Anne, are you there?
I sure am, Rose.
Okay. No, that's cool. So, yeah, I'm looking for those little squares on the side so I can flick between the cards if people want to talk about the cards.
Can you see that there, what I can see?
No, I can't. Perhaps you can read it. Is it there?
Which card would you like to look at? I can probably do it by hand.
So Anne, have you got a card perhaps that you want to talk about that makes sense in the situation that you've dealt with?
Oh, look, I think the one that stands out for me the most and always has done is can't, not won't. And I think so often children are expected to be able to do things, and it's easy to look at the child being the naughty child in the school. And I think what a lot of people don't realise with FASD is that it's that they can't do it. It's not that they won't. It's that they can't. And I think that's one of the best cards in the pack to use, even just as a reminder and to start those discussions with people, especially when we're working with kids that need that extra support.
Yeah.
Are there any that you find people really draw to? Is there any favourites in the pack, or?
Well, it's interesting. People draw to different ones all the time, and I haven't actually seen any particular ones that people are drawing to. I do know in the when we did the video, and hopefully some of you saw that video, there was a lot of distract, divert, redirect that was happening there. You know, so when they're being definite or insistent, or maybe stuck on a topic. Yeah, the need to distract, divert, and redirect. That's a constant, and some of the others are like, as you say, can't, not, won't. If you kind of get that in your mind, actually they can't. So therefore, what do I do next? Yeah. And sometimes it is about that that distraction. Yeah, and also the other one that's a little bit like can't, not, won't, it's in the brain, so don't take it personally. I think very often, you know, what we see is that behaviour that comes across as the oppositional behaviour, but what we've got to understand, just like people who have strokes, traumatic brain injuries that are going into dementia, if they've got something in the brain, you're not actually going to change that by teaching them. So you can't take it personally. But what you can do is you can help them to calm down in the situation. You can know them really well. You can help them relax in particular situations. You can know, the sensory objects that they might like to hold, that they might like certain kind of music. You might know, obviously, when they get tired, when they're going to need a rest, etc. So knowing all of those things about them and just keeping it in mind, it is in the brain, so don't take it personally.
Exactly, and I've noted that Tegan has said she likes to change the environment, not the behaviour, and that's really important too. We spend so much time trying to change others rather than adapting the environment, which can be a whole lot easier for everybody as well. And Cheryl has mentioned the 5S model card, and this is great too. I use this model in the education that I deliver because it can be as simple sometimes as the 5S's to really be able to make a difference in the life of someone living with FASD. So, and it looks like that there's quite a few cards here that have really resonated with people. Kate said distract, divert and redirect is a good tip, and it is. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the big difficulties is that you might be dealing with, say, a 16-year-old, and they look 16 and they speak really well, and but actually they may just need that you to be talking to them like a much younger child.
Oh.
And distracting them and diverting them like a much younger child. So what you see in your eyes is different to what you need to do, and that's the difficulty. So sometimes the cards remind you, because when you see the big person, you are automatically reinforced that they know what they're doing, especially when they're speaking particularly well. Although, people who understand their speech well will know that perhaps they're not necessarily getting all of those things right in their speech. But they talk about cocktail speech, which is often something that they can be very good at. I'm just aware that some people will know a lot of these things that we're talking about, and other people it may be the first time that they're hearing some of these things. So. Yeah.
One of the questions we've received too, Rose, is that do you deliver training in New Zealand if people need that extra training, or are we able to hook people up with you to get some training or attend some training for those that want more information?
Yeah, I am invited to do training for in different places, and there are the experts that I'm going to acknowledge in a few minutes, that who I've worked with and collaborated with, and that's where I've done a lot of my learning as well too. So they're available. But if you contact me, I can let you know what options are around.
That's great. And same here in Australia. NOFASD Australia do training right around the country, and all our details are going to be at the end. So feel free to get in contact with any of us at any time after this webinar if you need to as well.
Right. So just to go back, I think Tegan mentioned change the environment, not the person. So that's a really big deal, isn't it? Because so often we're wanting to get this person to change, but actually this person needs all the cues around them. They need to be comfortable. They need the routine, and that's actually what's going to make the difference for them. And so, obviously this takes a lot of support. It's more than just cards, but sometimes that's all you've got. You've just got yourself as caregivers, or whoever you may be, and the person with FASD, and you want to be able to respond in the way that you can help them to make sense of the world around them, rather than just telling them off for things that they don't really understand. So that's a really important card.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to pick just one card, isn't it, really? Because every single one of these cards are important in their own way for different reasons.
Yes, yes, and they link into each other.
Yeah.
As well too.
Mm.
So okay, if there are no more comments coming up, no, I'll just.
For the questions that have come up, we've fairly well answered. How widely distributed have the cards been, Rose? I imagine they've been very popular.
Yeah, we're getting inquiries from schools and police and caregivers, obviously social workers. We really started within our organisation with social workers and caregivers, and I guess as they become more widely known, more people will be using them. Yeah, so I guess that's what today is about, really.
That's wonderful. And I think, are there any other questions from anybody? That most of what we've answered, I think.
No, then
looking through, I don't think we've missed any, but as I said to before, if anyone has any questions afterwards, our details are available on the final slide. So feel free to get in touch with either us here in Australia at NOFASD Australia or with Rose in New Zealand. It's actually been wonderful. I've learned a lot about the cards today too, Rose. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. So here are the takeaways, a bit of a summary. So just remember, FASD is a brain-based disability. So we've got to reframe our interpretation of the behaviour, and we've got to catch ourselves interpreting the behaviour constantly. So if that's one takeaway, I think that's really important. There are things that you can do. So often we think there's nothing we can do, and we feel a bit hopeless. But there are things that you can do and we can do to support success for a person with FASD. And so, for example, the FASD practice principles on the FASD Eyebite cards. Help the person with FASD manage their emotions. They realise that they are upset often, and don't try and reason with them when they're upset. It is about actually helping them. But manage your own emotional responses. Really, 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 really important. We of course, these emotions are contagious, and our own emotions are triggered by others' emotions. So it is about managing our own emotions. Okay, take 5, sit down with the cards if you're able to, or even at the end of the day. And remember, every day is a new day, as one of the cards said. Okay, join up with a network to continue your education and support. So we've got NOFASD Australia and we've got FASD CAN New Zealand. And let's move it to the next slide. So this is where you can get the FASD Eyebite cards from. This is my email address. And in Australia, there's the address there. Contact us for the NOFAS Australia organisation. Just want to acknowledge the people who have inspired the resources and to work together with me. Want to thank them for their support and collaboration. Christine Rogan, Dr. Valerie McGinn, Dr. Zoe McLaren. I also want to mention Sue Jarvis and Sharon Tom, my very supportive managers, Ministry of Children, and particularly the Office of the Chief Social Worker for their support, and the other government agencies such as the Ministry of Health and the other agencies working on the New Zealand FASD Action Plan. And that's us.
Fantastic, Rose. Look, on behalf of NOFASD Australia, I would really like to thank you again for being able to join us today and deliver this vital information to so many people right across the world. And I'd also like to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been wonderful, and many of you will also get the opportunity or will be added to our email list so we can keep in touch and keep everybody up to date. So with that, I would like to thank everyone and wish everyone a good evening and rest of the afternoon if you're here in Australia.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Anne, and we'll make sure you get that link to the video.